I think we're starting with Snow White today. Starting with Snow White. Go Fox News.
Aren't even dwarves anymore because they thought that to be too politically incorrect. Snow White is not even a white woman anymore, even though her name is Snow White. So it's very interesting.
Anyway, that was Fox News, folks. It's literally Fox News, and they're talking about Snow White not having dwarves anymore, and Snow White is no longer. Sorry, it just cracks me up that that's news nowadays. Anyway, welcome to GAMcast Live for July 25th, 2023. Discussing all the news of the day through the lens of the law, the Constitution, and history. That is not how I really wanted to start the show, honestly. It is a very slow news day out there, so that means obviously I have a lot to talk about, but I do think it's going to be a quick show. I'm going to predict right now I can get through this in 30 minutes, but I may do a little more, a little less. We shall see. What I wanted to start with the show with today, and what I want to talk about today is just how corrupt and cancerous our entire quote-unquote political and media environment is. It is corrupt from top to bottom, left to right, to its entire core. Almost, I said this yesterday, but almost all of it is a hoax. And we're going to go through a bunch of the hoaxes today, just debunk them and kind of tell you what's going on out there in reality. But if you know where to look, there's a lot of there's actually good news out there. And if you know where to look, you can sort of figure out what's going on and why. So to me, that's sort of interesting what today we'll cover. So this is Victor Shi. If you're watching on Rumble, on Twitter, or on YouTube, you see him. He is a social media influencer. He's got 230,000 followers. And you think he's some young Democrat, uninformed voter. He doesn't know anything. And he doesn't, but he tweets a lot of stuff. He's a rabid Democrat. Republicans, he doesn't just think Republicans have policy prescriptions that are things he disagrees with. He doesn't just think Republicans are misguided. He thinks Republicans literally are Hitler. That's what he thinks. That's what he believes. That's what he's been taught to believe. That's what he spreads. And unfortunately for us folks, these people vote. And they vote increasingly in higher numbers than do rational people. And over time, I know people say this, well, it's always the case, when you're, Winston Churchill said, when you're young, if you don't vote leftist, you don't have a heart. And when you're older, if you don't vote on the right, you don't have a head. Well, that's true. But the problem you're going to have is these people have been brainwashed and their head is never going to be able to take over. So you're not going to be able to turn them back as much as you used to be able to do. Plus, they're unlike the people in the past. They do vote. They don't vote at quite the levels the Democrats want you to think they do, but they do vote at higher levels than this generation did in the past. And they are by far the least informed, that just have no idea what's going on. And when we get to I'm going to finish the show today with something that is happening to them, and they're being screwed literally by the people they worship and have been brainwashed to worship are the ones literally screwing them. Well, not literally, but figuratively screwing them. And one of the ways they're doing that is the very education that they are, prized. They're not getting it. They're not getting a true classical education that I got, and they're paying through the nose for it. I mean, anybody with any heart, right, would basically start working on, because if you started now, it would take you decades to fix the education corruption. You would. I mean, colleges shouldn't be near as expensive as they are, and they should be teaching people things. But if you started now, it would take you decades, and not only are they not starting, well, I'll leave it till the end of the show. You'll see what they're doing, which is just awful, and it's a tell, too, for where politics have gone, because the thing that I'm going to reveal to you, people that have been following this for a long time are going to go, duh. Everybody knows that, right? It's just right in front of your eyes. Anyway, here's his tweet. This was yesterday, actually. Happy Monday. This week, I'll be joining hundreds of Gen Z activists, organizers, and leaders from across the nation in D.C. to make it clear that Republicans are messing with the wrong generation. We are fired up, we are energized, and we are ready to re-elect President Biden. Now, he apparently doesn't follow the Great American Milk. He doesn't know that Biden's not going to be the nominee. Biden will be out in a couple of months. Well, it may be more than a couple of months where he can sell up enough delegates, but you get the point. It won't be Biden. It doesn't matter, because this uninformed person, he will vote for whoever the Democrats tell him to vote for, and they will then enact policies that literally harm his generation. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. Mirrors very closely what's happening to the black community out there. So let's get on to some of the news. If you read the Washington Post on January 19th, not that long ago, this was in the news, didn't make the cut for the last couple episodes, but it did this time for a reason that I'll tell you in a moment. Judge clarifies. This is the Washington flipping Post. Okay, it's not the National Enquirer, right? It's not some little tiny paper somewhere. This is the Washington Post, all right? All right. Headline, Judge clarifies, yes, comma, Trump was found to have raped E. Jean Carroll. Now, this is a New York judge who bent over backwards, a state judge, not federal, bent over backwards to help Trump be found liable of these charges. Actually, he may have been a federal judge. I stand corrected. I think he actually was a federal judge. Doesn't matter. Anyway, this is a judge who went out of his way to have Trump convicted by E. Jean Carroll. Didn't apply any of the rules. If the courts on appeal apply the law, this will be struck down for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest reasons it'll be struck down is that the only reason she was able to avoid a statute of limitation defense, right? You have to file these within a certain amount of time, is because the state of New York, all to get one person, right, is basically a bill of attainder, which is unconstitutional, which is another reason it should be struck down. But setting that aside, they literally came up and they said, for the next year, we're eliminating the statute of limitations for all sex crimes for this 1 year. Now, you know why they did that, right? They did that because they figured somebody would come out of the woodwork and sue Trump. And if you go, actually, there were some journalists who would do some journalism, right? They might actually go and try to find out if they had somebody all lined up, like maybe named E. Jean Carroll, that would take the. But anyway, so the judge bends over backwards. They recreate the crime, which never existed, and if it did exist, would have gone away by the statute of limitations. He bends over backwards, right, to show that they, like, for example, he wouldn't let people come in to testify the way that particular store was laid out. They wouldn't let people testify that the fact that you were never able to be alone, it was impossible because of the way that store worked. Apparently, is they had tons of workers because they didn't want you to ever be alone, not because they thought you'd steal anything. No. They were so high end that they wanted somebody there to cater to your need at every second. So that if you were going to buy something, or you wanted something, or you want a glass of wine, or whatever they're going to give it to you. I've had very few times in my life I've been to places like that, but they exist. Anyway, so he did a lot of things. Trump gets found. Well, let's get on to that, because this is why it came up in my feed and why I thought it was interesting in it. Because honestly, I followed it a little bit. I knew the judge was bending over backwards. I knew it was completely fabricated. I knew they weren't applying the law. This is not defamation, even if it's anything. But setting all that aside, apparently Byron York picked this up, and I didn't know this. But I knew generally that the jury had found that he had sexually assaulted her in some way, and for some reason, groping her was worth $5 million. I don't really understand that, but whatever. Anyway, so here's the actual verdict. I do stand corrected. It was in the Southern District of New York, which is a federal court. The judge in E. Jean Carroll lawsuit, again, this is Byron York, against Trump, is spinning the verdict to claim Trump raped Carroll. Now, we're looking now on the, if you're following us, if you're listening, I'll have to read it for you, but if you're looking at, you're now looking dead at the verdict form. And this is very much what a verdict form looks like. I've tried many cases in my day. I've written verdict forms, and this is what they look like, okay? So it literally says verdict form, battery. Did Ms. Carroll prove, by a preponderance of the evidence, that, 1, Mr. Trump raped Ms. Carroll? There's a yes and there's a no. The no is checked. All right. If you answered yes, skip to 4. So they don't have to skip to 4. If you answered no, continue to question 2. So let's do that. Question number 2. Did Mr. Trump sexually abuse Ms. Carroll? There's a yes and there's a no. The yes is checked. So again, this judge outright lie. Right? And he can spin it any way he wants. But the reason I wanted to bring this story to you now, I almost did it when it was in the Washington Post last week, but I didn't. Here's why I wanted to do it today, because somebody pulled that verdict form and I didn't want to take the time to do it and hunt down the story. But this is the point. One of the ways that our system is corrupt, that's not always clear to everybody, is now the judges are in on it. These mostly Democrats. Republicans sometimes will do it, but generally won't. That's not the way the system works. But Democrats are incentivized. This is a lifetime appointment. This person is incentivized to play politics. I've already read, if you've done it, and if you go to our pinned feed on Twitter or if you go to YouTube, it's up there. We spent an hour, I think it was last Wednesday's broadcast. You can also get it on Twitter if you scroll back to that. We spent an hour debunking the January 6th. Part of the reason they're able to go down as far the road of January 6th as they have is they got a federal judge to play politics out in California. Okay? Now, this is a new thing. You just need to keep this in mind. Now, judge says this, judge says that. Why do they do it? Because it's a judge, right? That sends a signal to the average person. Well, this is not just even a politician. Why? This is a judge, and he's very erudite, and right? They don't say things unless they're true. And here's a judge saying something that is absolutely contradicted by the jury's verdict, right? It's all politics. And again, if you understand leftists, again, it's one of the things you have to understand about leftism. And what's happened is the Democrat Party always had these people in there, but they weren't in control. Now they've assumed control of the party, and they've taken the party with them. And one of the things you have to understand, everything is politics to a Democrat. Everything. The breakfast you eat is politics. The lunch you eat is politics. What you drink, what you drive, everything is politics to them. 24/7, 365. Anyway, so here's Daniel Goldman. I need to look it up. In fact, we've been getting a little bit more chatter from the I Feel Cheated crowd, which is good. I really appreciate that. So somebody text me or email me, publius@GAMcast.net, or comment in Twitter what Daniel Goldman's fortune is. I know he's the heir to some huge fortune. I think it's the Levi fortune. I don't know. Don't care. The point is he's very, very wealthy. And what he's decided to do with his wealth, right, is not live the Hunter Biden lifestyle, but he's decided he wants to go into politics. That should tell you a lot. Right? It'd be one thing if he was like, trying to make the world a better place. No. What Goldman wants to do is convince you that Republicans are Hitler. That's what he wants to convince you of. So here's Daniel Goldman. This was tweeted at 9:39 p.m. Now that's important for a lot of reasons, but the reason it's important now is approximately 10 hours after I went off the air and debunked this Florida hoax. Right? It had been thoroughly debunked by this time. Here he goes. A Republican presidential candidate apparently believes that there were good things on both sides of slavery. And he's not even the most extreme GOP candidate. The GOP is the party of fear, division, and hate. The Democrats are the party of ideas, solutions, and results. All right. Why is he pushing the hoax? Well, because The View yesterday, this was yesterday, 3 hours after my show, they're continuing to push the hoax. Take a listen.
Vice President Kamala Harris went to Jacksonville to give her thought. Let's take a look.
They want to replace history with lies. Middle school students in Florida to be told that enslaved people benefited from slavery. High schoolers may be taught that victims of violence, of massacres, were also perpetrators. I said it yesterday.
Now, I wanted you to get to that point in the bit. So notice she said it a day ago, was thoroughly debunked. Even by, in fact, the black scholars who helped write it, he even went out and got on TV and said, nothing could be further from the truth. She's lying about this. The next day, she doubles down. And what I want to understand, this is a little bit of a sea change. It used to be the Democrats would go out there and they would plan a hoax, and then they would control the 24-hour media cycle for about 24 hours, and then they would just move on. Like my old mentor used to say, just move on, right, to the next hoax. And you were just constantly whack-a-mole, right? Debunk this hoax, debunk this hoax, debunk this hoax. What I think you're going to see as we enter the silly election season, I think what you're seeing here is a little bit of a shift. Now, I could be wrong about that. It could just be because this is race. And the race hoaxes, that's their pinnacle. They've got their they've got their Mount Rushmore. Obama's on it. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's on it. Michelle's on it. Oprah's on it. Race is right up there. Like that is up there. That is the highest of all calling. So it may be just with this one they had to double down, but I don't think so. I think they're going to start doubling and just continue. Like they're not going to move on anymore. They're just going to plan a hoax. And then you're going to debunk it, and they're going to just say, oh, yeah, it's happening. And I think the reason we're seeing this is, and this is good news, because if we are closer to the bottom, and I think we are, then that means we're closer to getting out of this thing. But I think they're just going to continue to debunk hoaxes. Continue with hoaxes until they're debunked. So this goes on. Let me skip past, because then they went to DeSantis, and DeSantis, it doesn't really matter what he said. He basically said, I think what they mean is this. He happened basically to say what I said, which was interesting. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Here it comes back to The View, and here's Whoopi. After it's been thoroughly debunked, here she goes.
What? Did you not see Roots? Did you not read it? What the? Okay.
Did you not see Roots?
I'll just, let me throw it to y'all.
That's if you
Before I get in trouble again.
I live in Florida.
Uh-huh.
I have been spitting mad about the culture wars that Ron DeSantis has been creating. So when he says that he has nothing to do with it.
Now, how did Ron DeSantis create this? The commission, the black scholars yesterday were on the news everywhere. I almost put them in the show, but I didn't because you're very, very erudite, very intellectual guy, you can tell. And he's upset about this anyway. And literally, DeSantis, and this is another thing he's been doing for a while now, they're the ones that did it, right? It was I thought they weren't even teaching slavery. Turns out they were teaching slavery. They took one thing in the 216-page document out of context. We debunk it, and now it's DeSantis that's doing this. And folks, I am rerunning the video. No, that's not me.
Blackies.
She was cursing so much, apparently, that The View had to knock her out. Anyway, let's listen to a little bit more of Ana Navarro and then move on to the next hoax.
Minions to put that legislation into effect. He has created the environment that has led to this. What they say is that...
Anyway, folks, for those of you out there who are anti-Trump or think that it's somehow Trump, and, I heard Eric Erickson yesterday, is a guy, local, I don't compete with him, Moshe did, he's much bigger, but, he said it again, we just need to move on from Trump. It's Trump, Trump's the problem, and he still doesn't get it. Not that Trump had anything to do with this, but the point is made with this hoax is if you give them something, they run with it. If you don't, they just manufacture it. So let's just say Tim Scott. The people are now talking a little bit about Tim Scott. Nobody likes Tim Scott. Believe me, nobody likes him. You can just tell the people that are running, he doesn't have any juice, but they like him because they think he's going to somehow solve the black problem, right? Tim Scott will be worse than Hitler, and he will be racist. Yes, he will be racist. He will be Clarence Thomas in a heartbeat. It doesn't matter who you give him, right? You just need to give that ghost up because it's not going to happen. Anyway, all right, and here's Kamala Harris. I got one more Kamala Harris bit. Sorry, this would be to this morning at 9:28 a.m., okay? Otherwise known as about an hour and a half ago. Instead of addressing the crisis of gun violence in our schools, extremists are spending their time trying to prevent students from learning our full history. That's the president of the United States, your tax dollars out there demagoguing Americans. And that's after it's been debunked. I think we're entering into a little bit of a new stage here. We shall see. So one thing that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I was taking a respite from the podcast and I didn't. But one of the things that this whole Trump indictment thing has become is a mechanism for the Democrats to create content. And when I thought about this, and it came to me, was when Jack Smith first indicted him over the boxes hoax. And people were saying, read the indictment. And a lot of places they had the indictment, and I printed it off and I started to read it. And somehow Andrew Wiseman, who's going to make an appearance on the show a little bit later here, he used to be the general counsel of the FBI. He was the top prosecutor for Mueller in the Mueller hoax. And he's just a rabid partisan. And you see this person proudly out there being a rabid partisan, and you think, do you think maybe this is going to cut against all those years you were the general counsel of the FBI, and people are going to wonder what you did when you were there if you're this partisan? He doesn't care. But anyway, he tweeted out something that he had started a new podcast, and I can't remember the name of the woman. It'll come to me. Him and a woman, they've started this podcast. And the name of the podcast, I joke not, is called Prosecuting Donald Trump. Anyway, luckily for me, he came up in my feed and he said, hey, if you don't have time to read the indictment, well, we took care of that. So they literally did a podcast where they read the entire indictment. So I was able to go through the indictment, listening to it while I was working out. So that was kind of handy. But anyway, it occurred to me then, I was like, oh my God, this is nothing more than content creation for them. And now you see this gentleman, Norm Eisen, has started to show up in my feed. My feed is mostly left-wing on Twitter, if you go. Anybody knows that. Because I like to know what the other side's going on. I already listened to a few people. They tell me what the right side thinks. Plus, the right side is just common sense and logic, so it's easy to figure it out. But anyway, here's this guy named Norm Eisen. They're putting him forward. It's incredible to me that on the left, you don't have to have any talent. I mean, okay, I get it. You've got content creation. You want to talk about Trump. You want to talk about an indictment. You probably got to pretty much have a lawyer there. Okay, go find somebody with some talent. On the left, they don't. But anyway, here he is, and just listen to this. This is a whole segment for CNN, right? And talk about how many more segments they set up. As somebody who does content creation, it takes a little bit of time and effort to do it, folks. It doesn't just write itself, right? But this, for them, is a windfall because they just get to get this stuff spoon-fed to them. Anyway, take a listen.
indictment, Norm, is imminent, or could it be weeks away?
Well, Fonnie Willis, the Fulton County DA, famously said indictment was imminent months ago. What imminent means in the criminal justice.
Before he gets to that, folks, one thing I told you yesterday that it's coming for the reasons I said yesterday, if you want to listen to it. Notice how when they go to him, he's so happy. Oh, Wolf. I mean, they are gleeful about this. This tells you part of the tale that it's a hoax. If they were serious about the country and they were serious about the grave crimes, even they wouldn't be laughing about it, right? This is pure Schadenfreude.
System is sometimes a little different. I do think that we're talking about days or weeks, not months. Typically, when you get a target letter, indictment follows on. We'll be looking for signs of acceleration, Wolf, like when Trump's lawyers are seen going into the Justice Department, as happened with Mar-a-Lago. That's a sign, hey, start.
So there you go right there. There's the tale. Wolf, we'll be able to film when they go into the Justice Department and when they come out of the Justice Department. And when they get a letter, we'll get to, that's all this is. The letter is content creation. Going down there is content creation. This Jack Smith indictment is content creation. Think about this. If they hadn't appointed a special counsel and he didn't open up 5 or 6 indictments, think about how many news days that is. Oh my God. I mean, they've got meals for the rest of the year. Literally. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So let's go. And here's Andrea Mitchell Wiseman. If indicted, Trump lashing out at Jack Smith would, quote, violate standing rules in D.C. court. Now, again, you have to have a little bit of legal training to get this one. It's called prior restraint. So the First Amendment protects your right to free speech. All right. And then we've told you there are different levels of speech that are protected, some more than other. The most protected speech out there is political speech for obvious reasons, right? And so when you think about a standing order, right, what that means is the court has a standing order. Anybody in a D.C. court, this is an order that all the judges, all the courts require you to do, right? They all have them, and they're usually things like, if you're going to file a motion, you have to first check with the other side to see if they disagree with the motion or something like that. So you have a standing order, right? He's going to tell you about it, but let me come back to this prior restraint idea. So political speech is the most protected of all. The most protected among that is the notion that I can tell you can't say something. Right? First, I got to let you say it. Then I can say, oh, no, you said that, and that's not protected, and that violates the law. Sometimes what the government will try to do if they want to go after you is they'll say, oh, you just can't say certain things. It's called prior restraint, and it is the most protected speech out there. The Supreme Court has resoundingly said prior restraint is unconstitutional. Yet, a D.C. court, they have it as a standing order that we're going to basically restrain your speech before you even speak it. So let's let Andrew Weissman, who's appearing before Andrea Mitchell, whose tweet I just showed you, let's let him explain this to you. Take a listen.
Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and former lead prosecutor for the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election. So many questions.
So for them, that's a resume builder. To me, I'm horrified. And listen, when you listen to this person, this is not the type of person that you would want, right, within 1,000 miles of power. He's clearly not a stable individual, setting aside his partisanship. I mean, you can just tell he's not stable. He's a person that he gets up every day and he enjoys doing things to you, telling you what you should do. This is just, you can tell the personality type a mile away. Anyway, he used to be the general counsel at the FBI. Think about how powerful this person is. He now has a pension from all of us. For the rest of his life, he'll make like 80% of whatever his highest was, which is an enormous amount of money, plus free health care for the rest of his life. And what does he decide to do? He decides to go out there and be a rabid partisan. It ought to be a stain on your resume that you were part of the Mueller probe. And to Mitchell, it's a resume builder. And again, folks, I say this all the time. You think Wiseman's alone? Think again. Turn on MSNBC anytime you want. CNN as well, and some of the alphabet networks, and you will see former prosecutors, all these people, and they are saying some of the most rabid partisan things you've ever heard. Anyway, he continues.
To ask you about Andrew, first of all, will the former president face any consequences from Judge Cannon, the presiding judge in Florida, of course, for his ongoing rhetoric, escalating rhetoric online that he's also reciting on the campaign trail? And what are your thoughts?
So, folks, before he gets to what he's going to say here and the point I want to make, this is something that pre-Obama that would have been laughed at. Even in the media. Even the media has been very, very partisan and very, very left for a long time. But this is a bridge too far. The idea that you can't say something because they have brought these charges against you is just nonsense. And it's not harmful rhetoric. I mean, they are literally every day they're trying to raise money, they're trying to smear their opponents. But oh yes, the Constitution is in their hair, their sights every single day, and that's exactly what they're trying to get you used to. Well, we can't have speech because that raises the rhetoric, and somebody might get hurt, even though no one's gotten hurt. The only person that's ever gotten hurt were those Republicans in that softball field years ago. But they continue with this nonsense. But there's a bigger point here than even that hoax. And this is what Wiseman's going to say proudly. This is wonderful to him. Listen.
Whether we could see an indictment as soon as this week.
So to answer the question about the upcoming indictment, I think there's no question, given the announcement of a target letter, that we're going to see charges. The big question as to when. I'm still waiting to hear that defense counsel has gone into the Department of Justice to make their last-ditch effort to forestall what I think is the inevitable. That's fairly typical that they're given that opportunity and that they take it. So that's the one piece of reporting that I think we need to wait on.
So again, that's now twice that this is it. First one was CNN, now MSNBC. They all know this is coming. So that's content creation. When he goes down to the DOJ, he makes his last-ditch effort or whatever, right? This is a joke, people. Instead of all the things, we got inflation issues, we got the Ukraine hoax is going on, or that we're in a recession, all these things. I mean, even you set that aside. I mean, we'd be better off if they spent their time paving the roads, for crying out loud, if you ever drive around Atlanta. But no. Let's spend our time on this thing about something that happened 2.5 years ago and is a complete hoax. It's bad, folks. Take a listen.
And then with respect to the former president's conduct, let's remember that he is out on bail in not one, but two criminal cases, one in Manhattan, one before Aileen Cannon, as you noted, Andrea. And it's also important to note that if he is indicted in D.C. has, as part of its standing order, free press, fair trial rules that limit what a defendant can say that could taint a jury. And so...
All right, so there you go, folks. They have a standing order with an Orwellian name, free press, a fair trial, right, to tell you shut up and prior restrain you. That is absolutely unconstitutional. We will see if the Supreme Court ever does anything about it, if any of this stuff ever makes it up to the so-called conservative Supreme Court. I had no idea they had a standing order like that, and the Orwellian name is just the cherry on top. But again, you heard him there. Does that sound like somebody that you want to be the general counsel of the FBI? And when you hear that, does it make you wonder what's going on up there? So here's some actual quote unquote kind of news out there. And again, this is under the thing I said about how the media environment and the political environment is so rotten to the core that you can't get anything out of it. So everybody knows what's going on by now. They're making you buy these electric cars, right? They claim that it's for the environment, but it doesn't make any sense because electric cars, you have to burn fossil fuels to produce the energy. There's other news out there that apparently for the first 70,000 miles, they actually are less efficient than. You don't really start getting the benefits until later. The fact that you have to buy something that you don't know and you're using, things are going to go, the old cars are going to go into the environment and be buried, right, and cause pollution. Without it, I could go on and on and on and on and on and on. We understand what they're doing. They want you to have to buy new things so that their friends will get the money, and then their friends will turn around and kick the money back to them, yada, yada, yada. That we know that part of it. But inevitably what's coming out now, and you're hearing story after story after story, the latest things they're going after is they're going after gas appliances. Gas stoves, gone. I actually have I have a gas furnace, and I also have a hot water heater that runs on gas, right? They're great appliances, but they want me to get rid of them so they can make money, and they also don't like the convenience of them, right? They're just better products. I mean, I had some trouble with my hot water heater about 6 months ago. Eventually was able to fix it, but the pilot light kept going out until I could fix the problem. But I tell you what, you go down there and you got the pilot, it would go out and then it would relight and it would go out for a couple of days. I fixed the problem. But the point is, it literally, you would have zero hot water. You go down there, you light the pilot light, in 20 minutes, that thing has hot water up. Electrics can't do that. If you cook, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can go in there, turn on the gas on the stove, right? And the pan is hot as can be in seconds. Electricity can't do that. But anyway, they don't care about that. So here you have, I think it's Marsha Blackburn, I think her name. She's a Tennessee senator. She's out here basically talking about this issue, going, hey, look, they want to take these things for us, claiming it's for the environment, but it's really not. And is this a good thing, right? And this is a guy who's tweeting her, Ron Filipowski. He's one of these, again, attorney, Marine, former prosecutor, and Republican. He's lying. Now defense attorney and Democrat. Rabid partisan. I don't know what he was doing when he was a prosecutor. God only help us, right? Marsha says Democrats are coming for your light bulbs, fireplaces, dishwashers, and washing machines. Of course they are. This is obvious, folks. He tries to mock it. But again, this is part of another little thing that they do. They mock whatever you say that's true, and it turns out later that it's true, and they don't care. This goes back to why I'm saying that you're seeing this issue of they used to do the 24-hour hoax, and then they would move on. They're not moving on anymore. It's really kind of strange. It may be because it's a silly season, but I think it's an indication of where they're going. Let's hear a little bit from Marshper, and then we're going to go to some more that they're coming for your conveniences.
In your washing machine and your dishwasher and your fireplace, your light bulbs, anything that they can go after that is a convenience item that makes life easier at home. They're trying to change the standards on this in order to have people buy more efficient appliances.
Why?
And Harris, people don't want that.
Right. So anyway, here's when I see what his point is. This is definitely true. They're not more efficient. That's a hoax. That's a lie too. I just got a new air conditioner. The one that it got replaced, I had to replace it because they no longer allow you to use Freon. The new one is 4 times the size of the old one, but they claim it's. They have these workups that claim it's more efficient. The old system that was 30 years old cooled this place just as well. There's no new efficient garbage. And even if it was, this is another point they try to play. I have this all the time. So another thing about when you have an old house, and I do have an old house, if you have an old house, you have those old window panes that were literally made. You can see the imperfections in them. And so whenever a window breaks, thank God it's not that often, I literally have to have somebody come out here. They have to cut it and paste it in there, literally. Okay. And I'll have people come by all the time like, oh, you need to get these new windows. They're more efficient. And they block this. They actually would block the sound. That would actually be kind of good. But then I explain to them that my power bill is usually less than $100 a month. Right. And I'm like, yeah, so you'll save me 10%. So that's $10. I won't pay for these windows for 30 years. And they go, well, I mean, I guess for you, for me, it's not a good deal. Same thing here. I don't buy they're more efficient. But even if they are, they're only minimally more efficient, right? And when they're minimally more efficient, yes, in theory, it would be better to move on to the more efficient one. Yes, but not when it's going to take you 50 years to recoup the cost. Right now, that's a lot of money out of your pocket. Right? Not to mention that I don't even buy the argument that they're truly even efficient. That's a lie. But anyway, he's trying to mock her for saying that they want you to buy more efficient, and she just misspoke there. But anyway, what's she going to do? All right. So on the point of them coming for your conveniences, and if you don't see this, folks, you don't see where this leads, I can't help you. But anyway, here's one right here. The LA Times asks, should Americans be forced to face electricity blackouts, quote unquote, over climate change? So these nut jobs not only want to take your gas stoves and your other gas appliances, okay, in places like California, where California is to us now the canary in the coal mine, right? That you see what's happening there, and it's going to come to your place sooner or later. And California is insane. They can't even keep the daggone power on. I'm not talking about like occasionally in Atlanta. We had a storm Saturday that was one of the worst storms I've ever seen in my life. Seriously, top 20 in my life. It was a real bad storm. And as a result of that, a lot of trees were down. A lot of people lost power. I understand that. That happens, okay? But we're talking about just losing power on an average ordinary day because they can't produce enough power because they're shutting down power plants for this climate change hoax, right? And the point of this article from the LA Times is that an official there was basically going, we really need to start asking whether we just are going to have to accept blackouts as just part of life. Now, again, folks, here's my point. I'm not saying that if the environment is really in peril, that we shouldn't do something about it. And I'm not saying if the environment is in peril and shutting down power once a day and going outside, I'd be willing to do that if it were genuine. What I'm saying is don't lie to people. Tell them the truth. Tell them what they're going to have to do. And that's what the Democrats don't do. They say, oh, well, if you do this, and this, they don't tell you the downsides. And this is something that we've seen for years. I remember being in college in the 80s. And back then, one of the big things for the leftists was, oh, we need to be more like Europe, more like Europe. And here's all the great things at Europe. Europe only works 30 hours a week, and Europe has free, quote unquote, free healthcare. It wasn't free, but yeah. And I had to go, oh, well, I like Europe too. Well, Europe's wonderful, but in exchange for that 30-hour work week, right? They don't have the prosperity that we have. They don't have near the wealth. They don't have near the quality of living. Yes, they have free health care, but they also have wait times, and there are certain things you can't get. Why do you think people fly here from Canada and Europe? Because they don't even allow to have those kind of surgeries because there's scarcity. And when you have scarcity, we don't have time to do all these super duper surgeries that aren't necessary. They focus on fixing the bones, fixing the heart attacks, and that's it. Some of these things that you take for granted, right, like cosmetic surgeries, they can't even do over there. All right? So just tell people the truth and then let them make a choice. All right? I'm not saying which way they would choose, but that's not what they're doing here. And they're basically going to fool you into it. But the other point I wanted to make about that is that's the type of person, if you read The Road to Serfdom by Hayek, one of the chapters he spends is, look, one of the problems with giving the government, quote unquote, a lot of power is, one, it'll be misused even by good people. But number two, it won't be the good people that'll run to go get that power because the average, ordinary, decent person doesn't want that type of power. It's going to be the people who aren't very nice people that do it. All right, this I put in just because I covered it yesterday. The New York Times epic fail in trying to tarnish DeSantis' COVID record. Basically, this is from the New York Post, and they pointed out that basically that if you read through the article that the New York Times wrote that I went through yesterday, basically they proved that DeSantis did better, both in terms of deaths, both in terms of the economy, and both in terms of the kids learning, right? And I told you that yesterday. That's the only reason it's in the show is just pat myself on the back, that I called it as soon as they released it, and it took the New York Post 24 hours. All right, folks, this is in the stack because, again, it proves me right. But anyway, so here's Lawrence O'Donnell. He's on MSNBC. Tonight I'll offer the unorthodox opinion that Trump trial dates don't matter because it's impossible to complete a Trump case before the election since a guilty verdict leads to an appeals process that could continue for a year or two after a guilty verdict. The only problem here is the word, and I'll highlight for you watching on YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble, unorthodox. It's not unorthodox. It's something anybody would know if they were remotely informed. The other problem is, right, is that the appeals can happen before the trial. They don't have to wait until after the trial. There are some things that can happen before the trial, and it can happen in criminal. Like, for example, if he files a motion to dismiss the charges for the vagary, they're violative of the First Amendment, a bunch of things he could do, right? The Article 2 issue that I've raised for you before, all those are things that are so-called interlocutory appeals, which means they can go up before trial and come back down. So now they're starting to realize that. That's O'Donnell letting the cat out of the bag because they're moving on from that hoax, right? It was a hoax from the very beginning. That was all content creation. All right, so here's another headline out here. Erie, Pennsylvania Mayor Joe Schember wants Trump to pay in advance for his rally. That's this Saturday. The reason is because Trump still hasn't paid the city the $35,000 he owes for his 2018 rally in Erie. That's called election interference. You're telling me that all the millions of dollars Trump raises is that he's going to risk his re-election campaign, right, on not paying $35,000. No. Obviously, what's going on here is there's a dispute between Erie and Trump over how much he owes in the Trump campaign, not even Trump. And they're fighting over it. And the city now is using their power to go, oh, well, I mean, no, you can't ever come to Erie again until you pay this bill. Well, no, we've got a whole process. It's going through the appeal process. This is not how any of this works, folks. If you've ever been involved with government or the legal system, and I've been involved in both a lot, there's a process. And if Trump did something vile or didn't pay it, they would capture the property. This is a hoax. This is an obvious hoax. This is all over the left-wing media today. All over. And they think this is great. And a bunch of lefties, if you point out that it's a hoax, they get mad at you. Right? Because everybody knows Trump doesn't pay his bills. Yeah, that's what Trump does. That makes a lot of sense to me. Over $35,000, I'm going to impair my ability to run for a campaign. I mean, it's just, some of these things it's just sort of upsetting that people can get away with these types of things. But anyway, all right, folks, I'm going to make it under 40 minutes, which is good. So here, I wanted to leave you with this one, a little bit of a white pill here. Sort of a red pill, sort of a white pill. So this is Nate Silver, our friend out there at 538 blog. He used to be really good with statistics and fair, but he kind of, he's kind of gone over to the left side. But anyway, here's something that's a reveal. Not sure how you can look at this data, ostensibly be interested in either meritocracy or equality, and want to move away from standardized tests. And then at the bottom, he shows you the basic point that if you go to standardized tests, right, the rich people don't do so well. But when you go to the so-called non-academic virtues, right, when you go to the affirmative action or legacy or donations, non-academic things like did you play an instrument? Did you play certain sports? That the rich benefit. This is all that to tell you this, folks. Everybody knew this. Duh. The reason they went to standardized tests in the first place is they wouldn't let in Jews. They wouldn't let in Asians. They wouldn't let in these people, right? Because they all said, oh, well, we don't have standardized tests, and we don't do it based on merit. We just look at your thing, and magically we have a lily white campus of a bunch of rich people at Harvard. That's just the way it worked out. And it was the people that wanted reform, right? The people that wanted reform that said, no, we're not going to do it that way anymore. We're going to go back to government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and we're going to have a meritocracy. And that's going to be standardized tests. And all of a sudden, Jews start getting in. Asians start getting in. Minorities start getting in, right? That's the whole point. And it's taken all these years for the idiots on the left to come back and say, well, these standardized tests are the thing that... It's just crazy, right? But anyway, Nate Silver making that point may help it get out there. But it's just a good example of how they hoax you all the time. And they've convinced a bunch of people that the very thing that was for their benefit. If you are a black person, you should want there to be standardized tests so that I got a chance now. They can't just look at my color. They can't look at my family. They can't look at how much money I make. They got to look at what I got on that test. And I got to get as good a chance as anybody else to get that and do well on that test and get in. Anyway, I'll leave you with that, folks. You're all caught up now with the news of the day. And if you enjoyed this podcast, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.